What's going on, guys? My name is Sam and you're watching Cast Blast Camp, and today I'm going to be showing you how to flesh, tan, and mount rabbit hides to make an awesome wall hanging piece just like this. Alright, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Thanks for watching. So the things we're going to need to be able to flesh and tan this rabbit hide is going to be alum, also known as potassium aluminum sulfate. This can be bought in the stores off the shelf, in the spices in the baking aisle, or it can be bought in bulk online and other places. Regular fine salt, non-iodized, a rabbit hide of course, and a half-gallon mason jar, and water. Since I only have one rabbit hide and I'm not doing a whole bunch of them, I don't need a big bucket or container like that, so we can get this done in just a jar. This is a half gallon or 2 quarts. This rabbit hide was skinned fresh and then it was frozen. I did not have time to flesh it when I skinned it, so I just folded it up, flesh on flesh, vacuum sealed it in a bag, and then put it in the freezer. It has been thawing for about half an hour now. So the next thing I'm going to do is mix up the solution in this jar. For this solution, we're going to be using 1/4 cup of regular non-iodized salt, and then we're going to add 1/4 cup of alum. Alright, now that we have the salt and the alum in here, I'm going to fill this up with water, put the lid on it, and shake, shake, shake until it's all dissolved. Okay, now that we have everything nice and dissolved in the water, and it might be smart to get some sort of catch pan to put this jar in. Just set it inside the pan like that while we put the rabbit hide in here, just in case if the water overflows, we can catch it in here. So the rabbit hide has been thawing out for a little bit over half an hour now. So it's now safe to start to unfold it without causing any damage to the folded areas. And now we're going to submerge it in the solution. And if you want to wear gloves, you can, but this stuff is not really that bad for your skin, but it can be a little bit, so just keep that in mind. If you don't want to have dried out skin or something like that, you might want to wear gloves. And now I'm just going to take a spoon and just kind of push that rabbit hide down in there and kind of get it worked down in there to make sure that there's no little spots that haven't been opened up, little air pockets or whatever. And as you can see, there are some air bubbles coming up as I move it around that was trapped down in the hide. So we want the whole hide to be submerged, and we're going to come back to this in 24 hours and stir it up again, but very gently and carefully, because these rabbit hides are very delicate. This process is going to be a multiple day process of letting this sit and soak. After several days, this solution will make the flesh on the hide easy to remove with your hand. After we flesh the hide, we will re-strengthen up the brine, putting the hide back in it, and this will also help tan it. Okay, I'll come back to this in 24 hours. So after 24 hours, you want to stir this around. When I put this in here, it was fur outwards, but since then, I have turned it flesh side out. This is the second day of it sitting in here. So just stir it around a good bit, make sure every piece of that hide is getting soaked. There's no air pockets, and that's how it's starting to look right there. It's starting to turn whiter too. Alright, I'll come back in another 24 hours. It has now been about 6 days since this rabbit hide has been in this solution, and after every 24 hours during that 6-day period, I either stirred it around or gently shook it up just to make sure everything was getting coated. Now I'm going to go ahead and take this rabbit hide out of the alum and salt water solution to see if the flesh is ready to be removed by hand. If you have some sort of gloves, preferably you'd want to wear those when you're dealing with this alum and salt water solution. But when you are fleshing the rabbit with your hands, it's easier to do it with your fingers when you don't have gloves on, for me at least. If you can, try to use your hands just to gently squeeze most of the liquid back into your salt water solution, because we are going to be reusing this for the pickling / tanning as well. You do not want to wring out or twist your rabbit hides though, like you would a washcloth, because these rabbit hides are extremely delicate and they will rip and tear very easily. So you just want to squeeze them gently. I'm just using my hand, gripping around the hide and squeezing. Not even pulling down, just squeezing. Now you can set your jar of alum and salt water solution to the side. Alright, so now that we have it out of the solution, we're just going to try to use our fingers to peel back any flesh. But rabbit hides are very delicate, so you want to be extremely careful when fleshing these. I recommend doing it by hand, because if you try to flesh these like you would, say, a raccoon or a deer hide With a fleshing knife, a draw blade, or even a pressure washer, you're more than likely going to start tearing or ripping or cutting holes in this hide. And if you don't want holes in your hide, you will have to sew them up individually, one stitch by one stitch. And that can be pretty time consuming. So to avoid that, we want to try to be careful from the very get-go. Some people prefer to start on one end or the other and work down or work up. Some people just start picking where they can get it off and go from there. You want to use one hand to put back pressure on the area of hide that you're trying to peel flesh from, so it doesn't rip the hide when you're trying to peel the flesh with it, or off of it rather. The tail's almost already ripped off. It's very hard to keep these tails intact. So as you can see, I'm using one hand to hold the hide, the other hand to pinch up some of that flesh and start peeling it back. The flesh will have like a pinkish meaty look to it, while the hide will have more of this off-white look. Alright, so you can see we have this flap of flesh peeled up and we're working it down. That's basically what you want to do to the whole hide. Anything that has this pinky fleshy material, you want to try to remove it. And underneath you'll be left with an off-white color hide, and that's what we're going to put back into the solution after we get all the pink flesh off. Since fleshing this can take a good bit of time, I'm not going to show you every single movement I'm going to do, but I am just going to continue to remove all this flesh off, and I'll show you guys the next step. Okay guys, so I've been working at this for a good long while. After a few hours of picking and pulling with my hands, and also getting a little bit of help from some fine tweezers and a sharp razor blade to cut off and pick off some of the harder spots, this is what you should be left with. Now there is some flesh left on here, but not a lot. I've gotten 90 to 95% of the flesh off of here, and the rest of the flesh I'm hoping I can get off on the back end once we start stretching this hide. So now that all the flesh is basically off the hide, we're going to put it back in the solution, but before we put it back in the solution, we're going to strengthen or freshen the solution up with more alum and more salt. This is the same solution that we were using to soak the hide in for fleshing. We're going to use the same exact solution. It doesn't matter if it's used a little bit or if it's a little dirty. This will work for the tanning process as well. So I'm going to add 1/4 of a cup of alum. We're going to put that in the solution, and then we're going to do the same with 1/4 of a cup of salt. And then here's 1/4 of a cup of salt. Now I'll put the lid on and shake it up. Once it's all shook up, we're going to resubmerge the hide for another 7 days. And every day we're going to come back to this hide and shake it or stir it around to make sure all the parts of the hide is getting saturated. Okay, I'm going to stir this every day for the next 7 days and then show you all the next step. So the next step is we're going to open this hide. Alright, now we have opened up the hide, belly side up. Now we're going to take a nice sharp blade and we're going to cut this hide. If you cut it with scissors, that can cause more hair to fall out, but if you cut it just through the hide side, that will cause minimal hair loss. So we're going to make a cut starting down here and just going straight up the middle of the belly all the way up to the bottom of the lip. Alright, and just like that, we have made our belly cut. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you the next step. So the next step is going to be to get some sort of container with cold water. You can use a pot, a bucket, your sink, a bathtub, anything like that will work. I'm going to use some plain cold water, and now we're going to take our hide that we have cut, submerge it in this cold water, agitate it a little bit, and then leave it sitting here for 20 minutes. This is going to help dissolve any of the excess or leftover salt water and alum that was stuck on the hide or in the fur. After 20 minutes, we're going to come back and do the same process 1, if not 2 more times. Alright, I'll be back in 20 minutes. Okay, now you can see the water has become a little bit cloudy. That's a good sign. That's showing that it's working the rest of the salt water and alum out of the hide. Now we're going to rinse this, fill it up with more fresh, clean, cold water, and do this again at least 1 more, if not 2 more times. Now that we've rinsed it 2 or 3 times, the water should be clear. Once the water is clear, it is ready for its soap bath. I'm just going to be using some baby wash. This will get the trick done, but other shampoos or soaps can work as well. I'm using cold water, and I'm just going to put a few squirts in here just to make sure there's extra cleaning power in there. And we're going to suds it up, work it around. Do this just for a couple of minutes. And then we're going to rinse it once again. Okay, I'm going to finish washing this and I'm going to rinse it and show you the next step. Okay, we have the hide completely washed and rinsed out, and we squeezed all the excess liquid. Now we're going to hang this up to let this dry over the next few days. And over the next few days, as this is drying, we're also going to begin to hand stretch it. But we're going to have to be very careful not to pull too tight or too hard and rip this hide. So if you want, you can hang this up on a handrail, a clothesline, a shower curtain over a bathtub, or you can get you a pan similar to this and some sort of rack. And you can open the hide up and lay it over this to let the air start to dry it out. Alright, so now we have the hide fully opened, and we're going to keep a close eye on this for the next 2 to 3 days, and we're going to begin to stretch this over the next few days as well. We do have a few holes already formed from the shotgun and possibly a couple from the skinning, but we're going to try to avoid tearing these any bigger or creating any new ones. It's going to be a challenge. Okay, I'm going to let this dry out some, begin to stretch it, and show you all the next step. Also, now is going to be the time that I'm going to go ahead and cut open the little arm flaps from the outside going down the middle towards the inside, just on one layer, on the top layer there, not through both layers. And with the blade, I went ahead and started the cut right there where my thumbs are at. Now I'm going to try to use a couple of skewers to put it inside of the arm flap to open it up so I can only cut through one layer and not both. Now that we have both skewers worked through the little arm flap, it'll make it a little bit easier to cut only one layer or one side of the arm with our razor blade now. Alright, now we got that cut made, and now I'm going to do the same cut to the other. After that, I'm going to continue to let it dry out and stretch this for the next few days. So it has now been drying out overnight. These rabbit hides are really thin, so they dry out pretty quickly. You can start to see it's already changing color to like a tannish brownish color. As it's drying, you want to begin to hand stretch this, but you're going to have to be very, very careful because these hides are very thin and they tear and rip easily. Also, using a tool like a spoon can possibly help soften and stretch and break down the fibers as well. So as you can see, some of that stuff is turning white right there. That's the fibers being stretched and softened. Okay, so far I have been working on the hide with the spoon. The spoon method seems to be doing the best right now. Some of the hide is still moist and I'm working that with the spoon, and it is turning white easier than some of the hide that is starting to dry out and crinkle. If you can hear that crinkle, it's a little bit too dry. You can work it like this, but it's not going to work as well as it is when it's a little bit more moist. Sort of like a very slightly damp cloth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some more water. You can either use a spray bottle, a damp rag, or something like a paintbrush to apply some more water to some of these stiffer areas to get them moist again. And then we'll continue to work the hide until it's all white, like some of this is up and through here. Alright, I'm going to let that soak into the hide for a little bit and then continue to work it. So we've been working the hide a good bit with the spoon. A good bit of it is starting to turn white, but some of it is still a little bit moist. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stretch it and staple it around the edges to this scrap piece of wood. Now if you're doing this for a hide that you're not going to be hanging up on the wall, then you might not want to staple this flat, because one, it will create holes in the edge of the hide, but you can trim around that. And two, you might want to be working this with your hands, stretching it a little bit better than you can do it with a spoon. But I'm going to be mounting this on the wall. This is going to be a wall hanging piece, and it's going to be facing first side out. So I'm going to go ahead and start stretching this very carefully and stapling it to this wood, and as it dries the rest of the way, it's going to dry nice and flat and allow me to work it the rest of the way with this spoon. And the way I'm using this spoon is I'm just using the edge, put it in medium to light pressure, and working these fibers down and breaking them open and slightly stretching the hide. Alright, I'm going to staple this and show you the next step. So up until this point, I've been using the spoon to work this hide, but as it continues to dry, I'm going to try to use a little bit of sandpaper. This is 80 grit to work this hide as well. Help break down some of this loose fiber and all this left on extra flesh. See if we can't get this hide even more soft and supple. I'm doing this very gently and light because I don't want to tear any more holes that are already in here. Some of these darker patches are just the backing of the hair and not holes. Like that right there is not a hole. That right there is not a hole. That mark right there is not a hole. But on the side of it where you see the hair, that is a hole. Some of these were from the shotgun, and some of these are just tears from the skinning process because this is a very delicate hide. So you want to start out slow, small circles, and not a lot of pressure. And then you can adjust your pressure depending on how much more you need to go. See stuff like that? That little stringy bit there was left on flesh. If you remove that type of stuff, it will make the hide a lot softer. But just like that, we did make a tiny little small tear. And that's how easy it is to tear this. So you do have to be very, very careful with this, guys. But it's not the end of the world. This hide is going to be a wall hanging piece. So if it has a few tears and holes, it's not going to be that crucial to this piece because it's going to be flipped over. And the hair is going to cover most of the holes. Alright, I'm going to continue to work this hide, being very careful, and then show y'all the next step. Okay, the hide is now completely dry. From the body to the face, it's all dried out. Now this hide is going to be a wall hanger, so it's not going to be completely soft and pliable. But if you're wanting your hide to be completely soft and pliable, you're not going to do the staple method. You're just going to continue to hand stretch it, but you want to do it as it's still moist. You don't want to let this get too dry, because if you let it get too dry, if you try to hand stretch it then, it's going to rip and it's just too late. You'll have to re-moisten it and then let it dry just a little bit to where it's still moist, and then stretch it the rest of the way. And then you'll be able to get a nice workable rabbit hide for things such as clothing and other stuff. But since I'm not using this for clothing, I was never intending to use this for clothing or something like that. I was intending for this to be a wall hanger. I'm doing this method to make it flat so we can get it on a foam board. So now I'm going to remove the staples and show you the next step. The method I'm going to use to remove the staples, just use some tweezers, safely pry them out. I am going to be stapling this down to this foam board so it's going to lay a bit flatter. I am going to be painting this foam board a camouflage pattern just for an extra little touch. This was the second rabbit that I've ever done, and this was my first one. It didn't turn out as good as the second one. It had more tears and holes towards the back. That's why it's a little bit thinner back there. I had to cut off some of the bad parts, and it still has a few holes in here. But I didn't want to get rid of this hide. So I'm going to go ahead and staple both up to this foam board and make a good wall hanging out of it, and a good reminder to both hunts. But first, I need to go ahead and paint this board. And what I'm going to be using for this is just a black foam board. These can be bought relatively cheaply at any craft supply store or stores that carry craft supplies. I'm going to be using spray paint to paint this. And these are going to be the 6 colors I'm going to be using to paint this. So let's go ahead and get right to it. And you can do whatever pattern or color you like. I'm going to be doing just a simple camo pattern. Nothing too crazy, nothing pre-planned, just going to go with the flow. I'm going to start with darker colors, work my way up to light, and I might mix in some darker colors after putting the light on as well. First color, earth brown. Next, I'm going to mix in some mud brown. Next up, down to earth brown. Next up, some khaki. Next color, camo deep forest green. And now we're going to come in with some army green. Just like that. And you get a little bit of a leaf pattern in there. I'm going to come back with black, and I'm just going to hit the edges and make a little black border and sort of outline or shadow this painting. Just like that. So now it'll have like a shadowed border effect. Now the next step is to let this paint fully dry and then put on a coat of clear enamel. You can use gloss or you can use matte. I like matte just because it tends to blend in with the camo a little bit more than shiny gloss does. So the next step is going to be attaching these hides to the foam board itself. There could be several ways you could do this. You might even be able to use some sort of adhesive to glue the hide to the board, but I don't want to go that method. I am going to pin this up or tack this up. Now you could use push pins, thumbtacks, little mini nails, or even staples. And that's what I'm going to use. I'm going to use a stapler, just a regular office stapler. One that can open up flat though. I'm just going to be using one side of the staple to go into the hide, the other side of the staple to go into the foam board. I'm just going to try to get on the very edge of the hide itself. So we got the first staple in. Now I'm just going to go around and staple around each hide and then show you all the end product. All right guys, and this is the end product. My very first rabbit hider is here on the left. I didn't want to waste it. It did get messed up. It's not done as well as my second one, but I wanted to keep it and put it on this board as well. This is going to be like a progression piece from my first to my second, and hopefully more in the future. So now I'll be able to pin it up on the wall and have it as a trophy and a reminder of the hunts every time I look at it. Alright guys, that's pretty much going to sum it up. If you like these how-to taxidermy style videos, let me know in the comments down below. But until next time, please consider liking, sharing with friends and family, and subscribing if you haven't already. Sam out.